The Wisdom of Paul Brunton. Spiritual Transformation 2. Keys to Awaken. Quest Video Series 1, Video number 6, presented by the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation. The ego self is the creature born out of our own doing and thinking, slowly changing and growing. The overself, our soul, is the image of God, perfect, finished, and changeless. What we have to do if we are to fulfill ourselves is to let the one shine through the other. We cannot help living in a human ego or feeling its wishes and desires, for most of us are infatuated with it. But it can be put in its place and kept there. First, through a profound understanding. Next, through a lofty aspiration to transcend it. And third, through a following of the quest until its very end. The body, passions, and undesirable emotions must be perseveringly disciplined. Whilst ungoverned and running wild, they constitute the lower nature. Such purification is a necessary preliminary to and prerequisite of the higher training, which opens the individual mind to spiritual consciousness. A student asks Paul Brunton a question.
I asked how I could get to purification, and he gave me the following exercise. Breathe in positivity of the overself. And you must remember that your attitude will create the atmosphere for whatever activity you may be doing.
When the brain is too active, its energies obstruct the gentle influx of intuitive feeling. When they are extroverted, they obstruct that listening attitude which is needed to hear the overself's gentle voice speak to the inner silence. Mental quiet must be the goal. We must develop a new kind of hearing. We who depend upon our own personal intellect and personal strength alone deprive ourselves of the protection which a higher power could give us. Since true philosophy is also a way of life, and since no such way can become effectual unless the feelings are involved, it includes and cultivates the most refined and most devotional feelings humanly possible. In the moment that you willingly desert your habitual standpoint under a trying situation and substitute the higher one, in that moment you receive grace. With this reception, a miracle is performed, and the evil of the lower standpoint is permanently expelled from your character. The situation itself both put you to the proof and gave you your chance. However harassing a problem may seem to us, if we can give up our egoistic attitude towards it, if we can keep the lower emotions away from it, the best possible solution under the circumstances will develop of its own accord. There is veritable magic in such a change of thinking and feeling. It opens the gate to higher forces and enables them to come to our help. Before passing into a higher phase of their development, the disciple is usually confronted by life with a situation which will test their fitness for it. Their success in meeting this test will open a gate leading to the next degree. Every test successfully met is rewarded by some growth in intuitive knowledge, strengthening of character, or initiation into a higher consciousness. The test will come with every major crisis, every minor ordeal. If our inner work has been well done, we will be surprised at the calmness with which we meet and pass the event, astonished at our strength. The ascending degrees of initiation into higher understanding of truth and large capacity to receive contemplative awareness open themselves to us one by one as we pass each successive test leading to it. These tests consist, in the lower grades, of willingness to submit physical habits, passions, and desires to discipline, and in higher grades, willingness to submit thoughts and feelings to it. In all, they lead to a progressive detachment from the animal and the ego. When body and feeling are cleansed by disciplinary regimes, when the intellect is inspired by meditational exercises, one is ready for the short path. It is only on the long path that one seeks so desperately for truth and insight. All the feverish ambition fades away on the short path, where we learn to hold ourselves in peace and patience. If the long path begins and ends with ego, the short path begins with a 180-degree turnaround, opens up a vista of the infinite over self. A student has a question for Anthony Damiani, a prominent teacher of Paul Brunton's ideas.
And then I can get rid of the ego? And Anthony told me, no. You also need to direct this ego, dedicate it to a higher ideal, a higher service, and evolve it. Remember that PB refers to the, quote, philosophic ideal of a fully developed, mastered, and richly rounded ego acting as a channel for the inspiration and guidance of the higher self. The important thing here is to notice that the development of the ego is one thing, egoism is another. That's why it's so important to cultivate a quiet mind, because a quiet mind that's whole and undivided isn't preoccupied with the thoughts of the ego.
Only day-by-day practice in the art of working deliberately and understandingly with the overself by denying the ego will bring you eventually to the higher stage where you can work consciously with it. The long path equips you with the necessary strength, purity, and concentration. The short path makes use of this equipment to unite your consciousness directly with the overself. The student has to stand aside from the thought forms, which means that we must stand aside from the person and look at it as something external to ourselves. If and when we succeed in getting behind it, we automatically adopt the standpoint of the overself. We must make the person an object and the overself its observer. Now, this element of pure awareness is something constant and unbroken. Hence, it is not ordinary consciousness, which is a discontinuous thing made of totalized thoughts, but transcendental consciousness. Paul Brunton, 1898 to 1981, a best-selling British author of a dozen books, spent much of his early life researching the original sacred teachings of Western and Eastern spiritual traditions. He traveled the world to discover and communicate with Christian, Kabbalistic, Vedantic, Buddhist, Taoist, indigenous, and Sufi masters. Blending the richness of his own spiritual experience and inquiry with these ancient and contemporary teachings, he developed a philosophy and path of practice that suits life in the 21st century, one that expresses the greatest wisdom and love available to humankind. Regardless of how it is named, we each have a divine soul, an overself or higher self, that is with us here and now, waiting to be realized. Paul Brunton's writings are a source of deep spiritual guidance for all those interested in living a divinely inspired life. Anthony Damiani, 1922 to 1984, was a prominent teacher of Paul Brunton's ideas and founder of the Wisdom's Goldenrod Center for Philosophic Studies. Inspired to penetrate into and understand the depths of traditional wisdom, he taught classes on the major philosophies as well as the teachings of Paul Brunton. His dedicated students compiled the 16 volumes of Paul Brunton's posthumous writings, titled The Notebooks of Paul Brunton, available from www.larsonpublications.com. Quotes were taken from these books. When completed, the Paul Brunton Quest Series 1 and 2 will contain the following topics. Please subscribe to the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation channel.